Welcome to Not Factory Approved. Here I am visiting my daughter and her kids, etc. And I decided it was time to sort out some of the mistakes I've made in this video. So stick with me. According to the COVID rapid test, I have the COVID. So it feels basically like a flu. See what happens. So if you don't hear from me, I guess I've croaked. In the meantime, hope you enjoy this trunk reline of a 1940s Cadillac two-door. Stick around and I hope it helps. Thanks.
So regarding the trunk carpeting, first thing I'm doing is the back piece first because it's the most complete piece I've got at the moment. So I flipped it over there because I know that I've only got the half. It's 50.5 inches lengthwise. So I marked 50.5. First I marked this one for the layout, including the slot. Flip it over. Put it to the 50.5 mark, and again mark the slot right here. And that, in theory, will fit. I don't think there's anything different between the sides. So when you don't have originals to copy, it is no fun trying to make templates that are as complicated as this. This is effort number 2.5, I think. Fortunately, they're close side to side. There are some differences though, which doesn't really surprise me. And then laying things out, make sure you get the order correct. So we'll see. Over here, I have the back panel. Things I've had to do in the trunk. Reroute wires, get them up out of the way, where I can hide them. Made that panel from a template, so I got to trim it a bit more. Was afraid to make it too small, so I didn't fully trust my template. So I made it a little big, and I'll trim off bits. So this is a really long, slow process, and then I have to reroute the wires there, get them tied up so that they're a little bit more out of the way. And I made a panel there to cover where I had cut a hole for the gas tank sender. That'll make it easier to service in the future. They used to have just a solid floor. You have to lower the tank to change the sender. And then I've got some hole plugs to put in there. Up there, underlay underneath, and side panels, and the black cloth, kind of like a felt / mohair, very low pile. And that's not original, but trunk liner, so that's what I'm going to use. I'm not going to try and get the cardboard panels that were made specifically for this car originally. Class it up a little. That's the theory. This has turned out to be a much longer project than I anticipated. Nothing new there, I guess. So this is what the carpet is going to look like. Just this trunk lining, bought from a fabric store. I've spent the last couple days working on this thing. Some of the things I've had to do is reroute the wires to make them longer so that they could tuck up out of the way of the panels, so that they weren't forcing against the panels or forcing me to cut holes and run them across the floor and so on. So I've done that. I've gotten went out and got the glue, Elmer's spray-on adhesive. And the trick with that stuff is to use lots and to lay it out in a diagonal 90-degree pattern. If you don't use lots, you'll be doing it again. Ask me how I know. So, progress is being made. I'll do the final touch-ups on the panel behind the seat, and then I'll glue on the trunk liner and put that piece in, and then I've got the side pieces to do. This is the panel that goes on the back of the seat, ready to go in. Now to see if it actually fits. I've glued it, lapped it around the edge, and that should work in theory. Sweet progress. It's in and it fits. See what it looks like when the side panels are on. How close I can get those. But tabs fit in the right places. In here and down there. Same on the other side. I can put the speaker back in. Looking like it should. Now I'm getting ready to do the two side panels. I think I've got it pretty close to where it has to be. Got a little bit of trimming to do here. Get it to snap in. The tabs underneath here that hold it I can get to. I've got to take a little bit more out of there to clear the bolt, the body bolt, but I formed this side and then I used that to determine where I needed to add and take away for this side, and both sides are different. And the other complications are that the base that holds the tire and the platform for the spare tire, to cover the spare tire, and the rod that holds the trunk lid up are in the way. So I can take this out and hold it up with a broomstick, but I've dropped this thing on my head before and it's no fun. Maybe that has to do with why I have so much trouble now in life. And I'll proceed. I wanted to actually put these in after the floor, but I just think it's going to be too difficult. So I'm going to try and trim this piece here, fold it over on the edges so that it fits properly and makes a nice edge for the trunk. But this will just be sitting on top of underlay, whereas the other ones are glued to panels. I might have to redo that, but I think that should work just fine. I thought I should probably show you the tools I've used to shape this panel. And you can see the edges are they're not perfect in any means, but the cloth is pretty thick that goes over that, so none of this matters. All I've tried to do is take off the tags that would catch on the fabric. So it actually feels pretty smooth. And the rest will be taken care of with the fabric and the glue. So circular cuts, just used an old style keyhole saw, not a new one because these ones flex more and you can get a finer tip on the end. A standard hand carpentry saw, nothing special. And that's for the straight cuts. And then I just used a belt from a belt sander. Use any kind of coarse sandpaper. This is 120, works fine. No reason you couldn't use 80. 150 would probably work as well. So that's how I formed it, shaped the edges, smoothed the edges rather, and have it ready for the fabric. So one final fitting to see if everything's in place, if there's any more adjustments that need to be made, and then I'll glue the fabric to it. So to cut the fabric, lay out the piece, each panel. I've done one piece already, making it about 1 inch to 1.5 inches bigger than every dimension. So 1 inch to 1.5 inches here, 1 inch to 1.5 inches on this edge. Same with these all the way along. Thing to watch is that I may be wrong about this, but I suspect this side will glue better than the other side, which has a finish on it. So I want this to be the side that gets the flaps that bend over, and the other side to be glued to the fabric. So this is the inside edge of the fabric, it's glossy, and there's the outside. That's what needs to be visible. Make sure you lay the panel in the right direction. When I initially showed you this, I had it in the wrong direction. It's one of those things you got to watch while you're doing it. In the moment of excitement, things can go badly. One thing good about this glue is that if you run out of time, you just have to respray it and wait. So I found that if I do this, wrap it around tight, press it in. This is after gluing around the edge and spray gluing that piece as well. Then I can find out where it's tight. If it's a compound or convex, then I can roll that around, snip it where it's tightest, and then continue on from there. And the material will compress a bit that way. And if I get a wrinkle like that, all I have to do is cut it. Make a slit. Just enough that it won't bind. Press it down. And here it's starting to expand. So probably be a series of slits here. Get around this corner. It does stick to you. Right there. Cut that, remove a bit. Don't go right to the edge because it will compress and take up some of the excess. A lot of this is approximate. It doesn't have to be exactly right. There you have it. One panel. Here's the first of the side panels in. It's held in with these tabs down on the bottom. It has a groove up here, a tab on each side. You can see that. And the panel slides in there, so it's held at the top. This gap here might not be factory, but there's no retainer up there. There's not much you can do about it other than steaming it and bending it. But it really isn't visible from this angle. If you're just standing opening the trunk, you don't see it. Down here, see, it's clearing this. So I should really trim this back a bit here to get it down a bit more, but then I'm not sure what's going to happen here, and I'll get into problems up there as well. That will be bad up in that section. Seems to be held well, doesn't seem to want to move. So then I'll do this side, and then I'll work on the matting for the trunk base. Got a little bit better fit on this side. The tabs hold it better. But still, I mean, it's held up here with the groove, the channel that it fits into. It's pushed up tight against the front panel, so it can't move there. It's got that tab down there to hold it in place. It's got this tab here holding it in place. So that panel is not going to move. The other one, I might get some pop out on this side, but I'll just have to try it and see. But I think it's going to look good. Now we have decision time. I'm going to put this matting down in the trunk. That's going to go underneath the material. So this, I can sew a piece, several pieces to get this to dip down so that it would be, the liner would be down in this recess. I'm not sure I want to do that because then I end up with a problem trimming this edge. I might just paint this more down that recess and just have the liner come around the outside of it. I'm still going to have some molding over here, but it becomes more difficult here with the welding and the different levels and the caulking, and I have no idea what was there originally. Have not found any pictures to show me. So I think I will probably just go on the outside edge and leave it at that. And then I'll get some molding here along the edge. Think about that a bit further yet. But I'm going to, I may also put lining here and sew it so it comes around the edges, because I can't, well, this piece I can probably stretch to fit. So I could go right to the edges, but it's not wide enough, so I probably will sew a piece on there. But the liner itself, the trunk liner, will not bend and stretch that much. It would be better to cut it in pieces and stitch it in. I'll show you how I'm stitching this up. Just take doubled upholstery thread, and here I'm using some quite old stuff, because the thread will pull out of this material long before it gets any sort of load to snap it. So it doesn't have to be a really strong thread. So then I've tied it together at the end. Just looped it around and tied it through itself. You can see that. And then I'll take the needle, 4 pieces of thread, just pass it through the middle, because this knot, because the underlay is so fibrous, any knot I tie will just pull right through. So just to stop it pulling through, I just looped it through itself. And then 1/4 inch apart or so, 1/4 inch back from the edge, and just keep stitching it. Nothing fancy. It's just going to sit on the floor and have trunk liner sitting on top of it. I just want it to hold position. Not trying to give it really any strength, because it doesn't have any strength. It rips like crazy. Some of us are like that. Might look strong, but we're really quite weak. Like hitting a bully where it hurts. His feelings. Now how to finish it off. There's the end I want. Has it coming up from the bottom there? It goes down the top and up through the bottom. Pull it fairly tight. Loop it through there. Again, let's hook it on the underlay. There we go. Now I can just run it through and bring it back through one more time. And that wallet. Probably that's about as clear as mud. There it is. Just stitched loosely on through there. No strength required. So far, that's what we got. I've stitched along here, stitched here, stitched along the side. I wanted to stitch it where it made sharp bends so that it would not pull back. And so that should all work. This ripped when I was working on it down there behind the tire rack. The cover that comes up over the tire. The tire sits in here. There's a bracket here that I've taken off already. This ripped in here, but I really don't have to worry about it because it's going to be covered with trunk liner. There's no weight will ever be in that section, so nobody will ever see that it's a dip. I might sew a patch there, but I really don't have to. So the rest is just smoothing it out. Still haven't decided what to do with the trunk latch recess. Now I just have to stitch it down on that side. I know, kind of excessive on the pieces, but once you get started being cheap, it's hard to stop. Besides, I like scraps that are square rather than scraps that are all sorts of different angles. I use the different angles where it's hard, and then I can make easy choices with a square piece of scrap. Now I'm starting to lay out the floor. I got the piece cut. I think what I'm going to do here, this for the catch, is I'm going to sew in a piece that fits down in the pocket, and then I will try and get a shiny trim piece that goes across here. And then I've got to do some cutting and sewing for the corners. Obviously there's too much material when it folds up like that. So I've got the underlay done. There's a few spots where I have to put in some sticky sealing tar paper kind of stuff to build it up so that the ridges don't poke through, don't show up. A few spots here, like you can feel a ridge. There's a ridge there running across, ridge there, and those will, as the material sits in there over time, it will sag, and then you'll be able to see all those. So I'll try and eliminate that for all the time I'm going to spend in the trunk, and all the people are going to see the trunk. Oh well, I know it's done anyway. This is progress up to this point. I've cut this through the middle. Then I trimmed it back to the corners, cut it off where I needed it to fit in that corner. Then I will stitch all these pieces together. I've taken this piece and folded it and then stitched it across so that it won't work out of there. So that should sit nicely. I may be gluing that down. So now I will stitch around and stitch all these seams and get a piece that fits down inside there. Then the latch catch is not visible under normal circumstances, so it should look pretty good. If you can't make it beautiful, hide your mistake. And inside the trunk, laid out the mat and folded this over each section, each side, to get the right distance, and that will come up against the side panel here without any kind of seam or anything. I might stitch this yet, but in the meantime I'm going to pin it to make sure that it doesn't lose its position, and then I'll trim this up, make that fit properly. Same thing over on this side. So I've pinned all of the trunk liner to the shape I want it. So what I'm going to do now is just do some loose stitching just to act as a retainer, and then I will put it back in and make sure everything is correct. I don't want the pins to slip, and they are prone to slipping with this material. It's just a little too thick for them. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to knot the ends or anything, I'm just going to wrap it around a few times, and then it's all temporary, so that should take care of it, and then I can stitch it all up with them. True confession time. Some people might call this Mickey Mouse, but I don't see why it wouldn't work. This is window sealer. It goes around the outside of the windows and it helps to adhere to the vapor barrier, keep the building windows sealed. But it's sticky on two sides. Just leave the plastic on the one side, and that should help to stop any condensation underneath the matting. Originally it was a tar paper kind of thing that you see at the back. It was all broken and in bits, so rather than try and piece it together and glue it in, I just decided to use the window sealer. I've used it before. I used it on the interior of the car, pieces where the tar paper was missing, so I think that should work. I'll let you know in 5 years if it doesn't. I wasn't happy with the stitching I did on the pocket here, so I went around and redid it with the machine. Just laid it over itself and sewed it up. Looks like I forgot to do those ones, so I'll redo that. I've gone around and I've cut all the excess off with about an inch overlap all the way around where possible, and that should just make it lay a little smoother. And I'll take this back upstairs and I'll restitch this so it looks a little better. So I know it'll bug me in about 6 months. That's as finished as it's going to get. Over in that corner there is a bracket that holds up the tire cover. The tire gets clamped in underneath that bracket, so I'm going to raise it up and bolt it. But I need a spare tire to do that first, get it to the right height. That's covered with this piece of plywood here, which has a bracket that fits down inside the rim. This is all warped, so I'm going to try and straighten it. It's 5/8 plywood, which is kind of an oddball size. So I'll try and straighten it first. If that doesn't work, I'll see if I can find some 5/8 plywood and make a new piece. So the plan is to cover that with trunk liner material, as well as have a cover on the spare tire. And then that's the piece that bolts the tire down. And then there's a bolt. I have to make the hole for it yet, but in here, make the hole for it yet, but in here somewhere. There it is. That's where a bolt goes to clamp up the jack, I believe. So there it is. Quite acceptable, I think. Not factory, but this is not factory approved. Just one more example. And I put the weather strip around the trunk. That's a little bit thicker than the original. So it does pop the trunk up a little bit, but I'm hopeful that will collapse with time. Otherwise, it doesn't look objectionable to me, just not factory. Continuing on with the trunk, I wanted to find some trim that would cover this point here. Obviously I can't have that loose. So I found this rug trim for going from carpet to flooring. I've notched it, I measured it carefully, and I've notched it to fit just around the inside. So it looks like it's got a bit of a finish to it. If you look around the back, you'll see it ends, but that's really not my intention to run it around here and keep it with the curve, etc. of the two sides. So I've evened off where the screw holes are, and now I will drill the holes to mount that on there. So just cut the notches out, rounded the corners, filed things down, made sure there's no sharp edges. Unfortunately, it is aluminum, so it's going to scratch if things are dragged across it. But I'm not planning to carry freight in this thing, so see how long that lasts. If not, then I'll look for something more durable. And the other big item for today is that the tail light lenses have arrived. So, bit by bit, it's getting better. Or more complete. Anyway, maybe not better, more complete. This is the finished trunk as far as upholstery goes, or trunk lining and weather stripping. I still have to do the second light up on top and the trunk lid. Unfortunately, this is out of sequence with the series. I was away and got sick, and there was the video I shot previously was kind of like an old Elvis song. Just a whole lot of shaking going on. I couldn't edit any of that out, so I have to redo this. So here's the shiny aluminum strip down on the bottom. I already scratched it with a screwdriver when I slipped, of course, but the lining is in. I'm pretty happy with it. It's got a few wrinkles in it yet. I have been touching it up with the steamer, and that's just I think I paid $40 for this. It's just a fabric steamer. It's made in a faraway land where they eat a lot of rice, of course. It's 1100 watts, 120 volts. Works well, actually. Steams, has 2 heat settings. So I've used it before on the other parts of the upholstery. Of course, it works better on things like cotton and wool than it does on anything with polyester in it, which is what this trunk lining has some of. But it has helped. It has shrunk it a bit into places. So there it is. I'm happy with the inset here that I made. I think that looks better than anything else I could come up with. Obviously, I still have some touch-ups to do here and there. This is lacquer paint, which I'd always heard was very hard, but I don't know if I got a defective batch or what, but this stuff is soft. I followed the instructions. I put in the reducer. It was a warm garage, like not too warm, around 20-21 degrees Celsius. Let it dry. The temperature didn't change while it was setting, but it is soft as anything. Anytime I bump it or anything touches it, I've got a scratch or a chip. So won't use that paint again. But there it is. And In here, see around the corner there, looks pretty good. Likewise over here, the other corner. A few wrinkles here and there, but I'm going to leave it for a bit and see what happens as the material sits. It holds the edge fairly well up in the front where it's got a sharp bend. So I think it looks good. It's an improvement over what was there originally, as it had a bit of carpet on the trunk floor, but other than that it was cardboard around the edges, special cardboard with a texture to it. It was good in 1947, I guess. It was hard to duplicate, and it would be hard to get it to fit properly, and I haven't found anybody that actually makes them. Although if they did make them, they would certainly not be cheap. It was extremely low production. But there it is. That's that part. And you close the lid and nobody sees it. But I know it's there. I think what I'm going to do is a separate video on this one. Originally I believe it was just raw plywood, but I'm going to cover it with the trunk liner all around here, put piping on the edge, and have a curtain that drops down and covers the spare tire. I'm thinking about how to do it, and I think that's probably the way that will look the best. So stay tuned. Episode coming up.